In this video, we will learn about the guidelines for making web-based content accessible by all stakeholders, regardless of any disability or impairment. This video is meant to provide general awareness of the principles of web accessibility and will not provide any specific training on the use of any particular tool or service to implement these techniques. We will spend time later in the 2017-2018 school year learning how to implement these guidelines using the tools and services we use in North Shore to publish web content. In short, this video will share the why and the what of web accessibility, but not the how. Accessibility is a broad term that describes the imperative to make our content on the web easy to access, read, and navigate for all of our stakeholders. We need to remember that we don't all view, interpret, or navigate web content in exactly the same way, and keeping that in mind helps to ensure that we publish content that everyone can consume. Accessibility is not meant to be tedious or difficult or meant to ensure that our web content is boring. With attention to a few basic principles of accessibility, we can ensure that our websites are dynamic and engaging to all of our community members. So why spend time on accessibility now? One major reason is that OCR complaints across region and state and nation are driving us to take a closer look at our web resources in order to be ADA compliant. We also have renewed energy around equity and diversity to ensure that all stakeholders have access in ways that meet their needs. And with all the changes happening in our district and across the state, it is more important now than ever to use our web presence to share important messages and content to ensure a consistent, robust, and reliable source of information for families and for staff. We are compelled to remove any barriers that might prevent a parent, student, staff, or community member access to that content. Here are a couple of examples. Including alt text in the code for your web images produces for the viewer a description of that image in text form. Images with alt text allow people who cannot see to use a screen reader that reads aloud the information on a page, including the alt text for the visual image. When screen readers move across images or content with alt text, the screen reader reads that alt text to them, letting the user know what's there. Some people cannot use a mouse, including many older users with limited fine motor control. An accessible website does not rely on the mouse. It provides all functionality via keyboard or other input device. When thinking about web accessibility, it is important to keep in mind some of the most common barriers that prevent users from accessing web content. When a person has visual impairments, they might not be able to see or read content. They might also have issues with color blindness. Many people with vision impairments use tools that turn text and images on a screen into speech, reading aloud the content for the user. Some of our stakeholders might have limited motor function. People who don't have use of their arms or hands, for example, sometimes navigate the web via the keyboard, pressing keys with a stick operated by their mouths. This requires site design that allows for exclusive keyboard navigation. To experience this, try getting around a web page using just the keyboard without using a mouse. People with hearing impairments may not be able to perceive the audio content that we post to our site unless it is accompanied by something they can read, such as a transcript or captioning on a video. We will base our learning in this video on some well-documented principles of accessibility. These guidelines will shape our work moving forward as we develop training and review existing content and create new material for our classroom, school, and district websites. The guidelines were developed and published by the World Wide Web Consortium, or W3C, which is an international community that develops open standards to ensure the long-term growth of the web. The World Wide Web Consortium has grouped their guidelines into 4 categories, which conveniently make an acronym that will be easy for us to remember. POUR: perceivable, operable, understandable, and robust. We will review each of these categories and review just a few, but not all, of the W3C's techniques for meeting the needs of all stakeholders on the web. The P in POUR stands for a category of guidelines that allows for users to perceive content on our website. This means that we need to provide ways for stakeholders to get at the content, either by reading, viewing, or by using some assistive technology such as a screen reader. Let's look at some specific techniques. Using alternative text is one way we can make content accessible. Alternative text allows for a text-based description to be attached to a picture or image to aid those who cannot visually interpret the image. Many people with vision impairment use screen reading technologies to access content, and alt text allows the screen reader to read a description to the viewer that tells them what is presented on the screen. Here are some suggestions for making alt text. Images should always have alt text. If the image has text in it, include that text in your alt text. Make the text meaningful and contextual. Keep it short. Some systems do have character limits. And if clicking on the image is a navigational trigger, include click on the image to go to blank. Continuing with the perceivable category, any audio or video-based content that we post to our site should have captions and/or a transcript. This allows people who have hearing impairments to understand what is being presented in the content. There are several tools available for adding captions into video content. YouTube, for example, offers a fairly simple option for adding captions. Simply click on the timeline in the video and type the caption you want to appear at the bottom of the frame. Be sure when adding captions that you include narrative elements, descriptions of sounds that indicate what is happening in the video. This might be something like students laughing or door slamming. We need to be sensitive to our use of color. When posting content, it can be tempting to use lots of color and special background images to make our websites appear exciting. And while we do want to post engaging content, we don't want to create a barrier to understanding for someone who may have color blindness or visual impairments that rely on having strong contrasting colors to perceive content. Always make sure that you have high contrast between text and background. Generally, this means dark text on light backgrounds or light text on dark backgrounds. The third example here shows poor contrast. The text and background are too close to the same color, and this would be hard for someone with color blindness or contrast issues to understand. Another recommendation is to use typed electronic text or e-text as opposed to the image of text. For example, it would be better to type the word abracadabra than to post a clip art or word art image of the word abracadabra. If you need to use an image of text, be sure to use alt text to provide a description of the text. Lastly, keep blocks of text fairly short and align them left or right rather than spread evenly or justified across the page. The website on the right has made very poor use of contrasting colors. It is nearly impossible, even for a person with normal vision, to make sense of the content. The O in poor stands for operable. Operable is a term that refers to the functional access to content on our site. Assistive technology should be able to read and interpret the content on our site in ways other than through vision. When creating link to another page or site or resource on your site, be sure that all the links you create make sense when read out loud by themselves, as they would by a screen reader. Click here or download don't indicate what the viewer will get when they click on that link. In this example, the link to the Community Resource Directory website is active, and when read out loud makes sense in terms of what we'll receive when clicking on the link. In contrast, the click here at the bottom of the page doesn't give us an indication of what will happen when we click. We also want to avoid making the URL of the link the text for the link. Reading this link would result in a nonsensical web address read out loud and very little description of the destination. It would be better in this case to use View the Skyview PTA website and make that text the link to the Our School Pages website. PDF tagging is an important part of making our web content operable. PDF tags allow screen readers to interpret the structure of a PDF that we post to the web. We tag a PDF by adding hidden structural cues that tell a screen reader when a new section begins and where images occur within the content. This is an example of what happens when we use the automatic tagging feature in Adobe Acrobat. We will be researching other tools that will help webmasters and editors to tag PDFs before posting. Learning how to tag PDFs will be a subject for a later training. The U in poor represents the need to make our content and structures understandable for users. This deals mainly with the navigational elements and the styles we use to organize content on a page. All content on our sites and pages should be navigable through keyboard input, using the Tab key or the Return key, the arrow keys, etc. We should always provide ways to help users navigate, find content, and determine where they are using consistent structures and page titles. The channel bars on our school and district website allow for users to navigate consistently when moving from page to page. The breadcrumb trail is important so that users can understand where they are in your site and how to get back to where they were before. We should always provide a method that allows users to skip navigation or other elements that repeat or might be irrelevant to them on a page. This is usually accomplished by providing a skip to main content or skip navigation link at the top of the page, which jumps to the main content of the page. Whenever possible, use navigational links or edit your content to prevent long pages of scrolling content. The R in POUR stands for robust. This category of accessibility guidelines tells us to be careful to review our content with a lens toward the varied type of technologies that users might leverage to understand content. Whether a user employs a screen reader, a mouth-operated input device, the keyboard, or a touchscreen computer, the content we present to them should be such that much of our site is consumable using those technologies. Here are some examples of do's and don'ts for users with dyslexia and those with physical or motor impairments. They include things like using images and diagrams to support text, and designing for mobile and touchscreen devices in mind. Whenever possible, preview your content on a phone or tablet before publishing. That will help you to understand how that content will display for those users that prefer those technologies to receive content. Please know that much of the content you publish may already be web accessible because of the nature of the tools you used to post it. However, if you find yourself with questions or in need of some help making adjustments to your content, please reach out and ask for help. And stay tuned for some training opportunities that will help you to correct any content you may have already posted and be sensitive to web accessibility as you post new content in the future. In this video, we learned about the guidelines for making web-based content accessible by all stakeholders regardless of disability or impairment. We will spend time later in the 2017-2018 school year learning how to implement these guidelines using the tools and services we use in North Shore to publish web content.